Everybody, Texas Trucker here, Lance's Performance Shop, Lone Star Mopars.com. We're back for KC Tool Haul number 30, just did number 29. In that video, I predicted it's probably about 49 in the shop. I made the mistake of looking at the thermostat. It is 45. So I overestimated it. I'm freezing. If you're wondering why I'm still out here, well, one reason, tool haul number 30, not that long. I wanted to go ahead and knock it out, have something I could go ahead and edit. Now, I did want to mention one thing I forgot to on these Felo pliers from tool haul number 29. Right there, do you see that? That silver streak? Pretty sure that that is anti-seize. It's not from me, shockingly. Typically, when I see that, I know exactly what it is. I don't know if that's like something from Felo. I don't know if it was handled. I don't know if like someone at KC Tool had it on them. Should be able to clean it up. It's not a huge deal, but I thought it was always funny when you see anti-seize on something and you actually didn't do it yourself. But back to tool haul number 30. It was brought about because of a tool of the day. Once again, we've got our promotional flyer from Wera. If you're interested in their screwdrivers, that round of drivers is actually a pretty good deal. Of course, they've got the Colos, lots of other things. They've got a ton of new products coming out. I think a couple of them are available now, some new stubby screwdrivers. And then I want to say sometime in April is when we should have access to like their Joker stuff, which is adjustable wrenches Joker, which is like really cool. They're auto adjust. And then there's tons and tons of different takes and upgrades to the Joker line, which I actually personally enjoy. Speaking of Wera, though, also included with any order from KC Tool is a bit of thanks. This one is from Wera. It's just a standard number 2-bit like we showcased in the last tool haul. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy there, but it is always nice to get. Now, we're going to go ahead and get started, not with the tool of the day. That'll be our grand finale, but with a repeat purchase. If it's a repeat purchase, that must mean one thing, that it's good, right? I would certainly have to say so. This comes from Stahlwille. It is their part number 12374. It costs all of $5.52. I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're like, okay, a repeat purchase from Stahlwille. How many times are we going to see you bring in those red remove before flight key fobs? Well, that's actually not what this is. It comes in a bag that is that size. If it tells you anything, it probably doesn't. But what you need to see is right here. This is a paddle of what you're asking. You got a hanging hole there, you got a hanging hole here. It's just their steel wire brush. I've got the one I brought in. I only have one other one of this, and it's held up really well. And then what I have here, this is what I typically have, and this is similar to what we get at work. At work, I had a period where I was getting them from Mintcraft. I think they were made in the USA. They were like really good. They held up way, way better because we use wire brushes all the time at work, and they hold up really, really good. There's like a ProSource brand that looks identical, but it doesn't hold up as well. I don't really know, but the bottom line is this is made in Germany. It's not as densely populated. I know these are spread out, of course, but the design is slightly different. It's got more of like a user-friendly bend in it. I'd hate to call that like ergonomics, but you see the bend there, and it actually does make a difference. This one, the only real bend is kind of in the contour for your hand. I do, for what it's worth noting, tend to prefer the thicker sections there, which you have on virtually any readily available one at a hardware store. This one's kind of got the rough edges, but it has done well for me here. I'm thinking about taking this one to work. The reason I tacked it on was simply to get the free freight. So it was something that I knew that I would need shortly, and I thought about taking it to work. I might do that, actually. See how well it holds up there. If you're in the need for a wire brush and you're tired of picking up trash locally, or you're not happy with anything you can get, try the Stahlwille one. It's only $5.52, which for a lot of you that might be less than what you're paying at a local hardware store. The next item is not tool of the day. It is from Gedore, and I'm pretty excited about it. This is something I wanted to bring in. I couldn't really ever justify it just because I felt like it was a little pricey. And it's not expensive, it's just I felt like it should be a little cheaper. I think when I got this, there was a promotion on it, and it might have been decent enough for me to say, hey, I'm going to pull the trigger on it. It's their part number 643. It kind of ties in with what we just had. It's their brake caliper brush. Now this thing would typically retail for $24, but what really sells me on it is, one, it's made in Germany, and two, the handle, the head, the angle, and I'm optimistic that this will do a pretty good job. I have Stahlwille's brake caliper brushes, if you're thinking, hey, haven't we seen these before? The catch with those, they're brass coated, so they're kind of not as aggressive, a little less abrasive. I'm not exactly sure that I will use this on calipers all the time, but I do think it's going to come in handy, particularly on the duster. I've got some stuff I'm gonna go to town with, but the handle, for what it's worth, feels really good, and it doesn't have those sharp edges, kind of like the Stahlwille wood handle does. It's pretty lightweight. It's got the hanging hole. It's a cool color scheme, and the bristle count looks to be pretty solid, I have to say. So for 24 bucks, I can't really complain about that. And again, I think I got it for probably, for me to buy that, I feel like it would have had to have been like $14.99. Again, some of those like first quarter sales they had have kind of expired. That's why I give you the current price of $24 if you were to watch the video and go buy this now. That would be great on Tool of the Day. It's also great with a discount. So that brings us now to the final item. This was a Tool of the Day, and it's something I kind of wanted to go Knipex on this, and there's some sales on a couple of them, but this one was like a really good buy. Standard price, it's $63.49. I don't exactly remember what it was listed at on Tool of the Day, but it was good enough for me to say, we're doing it. And so I did, and then I just needed to get free freight, so that's where he came in. But right here, it's from Gedore. It's in a tiny little box. The part number is 8340-Z-200. TL is kind of important because that's going to correlate to the handle style here. But the price point standard on these would be $63.49. I'm wanting to say these were around 30 bucks, maybe 29 to 35ish. I feel pretty confident in that range. And at that price point, I felt like, yeah, that's kind of hard to say no to, because currently at the house I don't have any. Now I do have ways to cut bolts at the house. Spoiler alert, that's what's in my hand now, is a bolt cutter. Again, this is from Gedore. As you can see there, it's got really nice branding. It's made in Austria. It's got their dipped handle, but it's the textured one, which I happen to actually really like. I think I kind of like it better than their big bulky comfort handle. Something like this, a bolt cutter where you're like applying a crud ton of force, that's where you would really appreciate like a softer handle. But I found for like a lot of the smaller pliers, it's kind of overkill. But like for a bolt cutter, yeah, I would have no issues suggesting that you spend a little extra, because if you use it frequently, which some people will, some people won't, kind of depends what you're doing and what projects you have. But for cutting nails, things like that, if you're going to be doing that all across, say, a deck or a fence or fixing someone else's work, I think you'd be well advised for your hands to get something soft. That said, at work we have tons of bolt cutters. They're giant. They dwarf this thing. They make this look like a pathetic kid's toy. But for around the house, I didn't really have a standard dedicated pair of bolt cutters, and that's kind of where these came in. I felt like they'd be a pretty cool deal. Now, what I do have for cutting bolts that works just fine, is archaic and strange as it seems, is like your wire cutters, the crimpers. They always have those little slots that no one ever seems to know what they do with them, and that's where you cut like long screws. They're typically, like smaller sizes, but it works really good. I know it doesn't seem like it would. If you're ever bored and you actually have the hardware at home or the need to do it, try it, because you'll be surprised that putting a screw in a hole and then pulling the legs of your crimper apart actually shears a bolt, but it does, and it does so quite easily. Now, the way these are designed, we've kind of got the cutting edge. Again, since this is it, this is the end of the video, I don't have anything else in the box except the box. So I can kind of do a little bit of a demo here for you. The way these are designed, I believe they want you to kind of pre-cut and then final cut. Could be mistaken there, but usually when you see that gap, that's kind of what they want you to do. In my left hand, I have a brand new grade 5 quarter-20 by 3/4 inch bolt. What does that translate to in metric? I don't really care, because it's SAE to me. I think what they want you to do with this tool is kind of get it down here where it's nestled, and I think you crimp. This might be small enough we don't have to. Don't hold me to that. I've never tried this particular pairs. I don't know if they're a fly off or a drop or a hold in place. Typically bolt cutters just fly off. So I would recommend safety glasses. And let's see if we can crimp it. I think I'm trying to note where we're at. Oh, that might not be good with the camera. If you see an area where it looks like the thread is fat, that's because it is, and that's because that's where we crimped it. Let me come down, try to get this where you can see it right there, right? You can kind of see what I'm talking about, this little galley right there. And again on the other side. And so once you've crimped it like that, then you want to come in and I think you grab with the serrated portion, right? Which, man, that's just not working out. Well, there we go. So right there, now I've moved up from that trough to just the blade portion, if you will. And I'm actually going to grab my safety glasses because, again, if you've used bolt cutters, typically, when I say the ones that work are bigger, you got to realize, like, when I'm cutting bolts, it's almost always 5/8 or 3/4, and this is 1/4 inch, so you do the math. That's a significantly bigger size. So what we want to do is we get our safety glasses on just in case something crazy happens. But, man, knuckles are popping. Right there, I think you can kind of see the progress we made. And I'm not sure. Maybe this is over capacity for it. I wouldn't think it would have been. Like the quarter inch bolt isn't that much. Let's try it again. Kind of losing my voice. My nose is starting to run because it's cold. It's uniform on both sides for whatever that may be worth, but I wouldn't think it would be this difficult to cut a 1/4 inch bolt, but you live and learn. All right, so yeah, that's I don't know. It got it done. It's definitely a shooter, so I'm glad we had the safety glasses on. But one of two things here. Number one, either the tool is not intended to cut 1/4 is like way beyond its capacity, perhaps. I didn't think it'd be stretching it that much. Or it's not very good, and I don't know which one of those it is, but it's going to be one of the two. And right there, it's almost like there's it looks like wax paper to me on that coating, and the weird thing is it's like uniform wear and tear. But if you note, I said these are opening a lot easier, so they certainly are. I don't know. Again, I kind of wanted to go Knipex on this, but this was like a super good buy. I think there's a lot of things this can cut. Now, I don't have a lot of really small hardware. Let me go find some stuff, and we'll see if it fares better. Alright, I'm freezing out here. I found a couple of nails, but I don't really want to cut them. So, what I want to do, I've taken a look at this, and I've honestly tried my best to figure out what this is. In terms of like a coating of some sort, it really almost seems like a wax paper. You can kind of see I'm moving it with this little Hazette screwdriver. And I don't know. I looked at the specs. It was in metric. I wouldn't think a 1/4 bolt. I'd understand if that was like near the capacity, but I wouldn't think it should have had that much trouble with it. I'm not ready to write these off completely, but in terms of cutting a bolt, I wouldn't say I'd want to use them for a quarter inch bolt ever again, much less anything bigger. Which, granted, I don't think you'd go a lot bigger. I honestly thought 1/4 would be more than capable of this tool. What I have, though, is a tiny screw, and I don't really consider this a bolt, personally. You know. Like a bolt to me would start at, like a 1/4, 5/16, 3/8. I don't know, maybe I'm different than most people, but this is just a little screw, which again, you can cut easily with tons of things. And I don't know if we need to baby it and put it down here in the bottom to crimp it first and kind of get the cut going, or if we can just go to town. So got my safety glasses on again, and that went all the way. It crimped it basically. Now okay, this, let me come right up to the top. Okay, this has already been pre-crimped, but that was effortless. Okay, to the tool's credit, like that was nothing. There was no issue there. It cut clean. I'm not going to crimp anything this time. I'm just going to come in right here. It's up towards the top of the jaws. Let's see. I think you can see that pretty well. I'm trying to decide which angle you would want. Let's watch it from the back side maybe. So here's my hand right here, left hand, not involved in this process. Very little effort so far. And now we're going to come in, squeeze again. That, to me, that wasn't much effort. I mean, that's what you would expect from a bolt cutter. Would be to come in and just make quick work of something like that. 1/4-20 by 3/4, no sir, that ain't happening. 1/4-inch bolts, I would not advise you use this at all. Take from that what you will. Now in terms of like wire, I think this would be fantastic. I've got some bread ties I was doing something with over here. Oh yeah, this would have been to hang up a sign way back in the day. So that's a wire inside. Let's go ahead and put that in place. I mean, that just basically was like peeling paper. Okay, so maybe we just taxed this a little too much. Hopefully we haven't damaged it too bad. I think this would be great maybe for like cable, maybe some, you know, close to battery cable. I don't know if it could do that really. I would assume it could. I'm not quite sure what to make of this tool, and I think I'm going to have to try and maybe research what they think it should cut. The issue with Gedore, they never have their catalogs available. They're like always sold out and, you know, out of stock. So I don't have a catalog on it to kind of pull up the specs. But it cut through the screw just, I mean, beautifully. We'll come in, I can't do anything with this now, so we'll just continue cutting it, basically. But the problem is, like, I have side cutters that could do this, you know, to this screw. This, you know, I wouldn't typically use a bolt cutter to cut this. You know, I would use a side cutter. Cuts fantastically easy through that, as it should. But I honestly didn't think 1/4 inch would tax that this bad. It did cut it, but my lord, I wouldn't want to have paid money to have to do that every time I want to cut a 1/4 inch bolt. So I don't know. I really am kind of at a loss with this one. It feels good in hand. It's when I cut through that, there's no pressure at all. When I was trying to cut through that 1/4 inch bolt, I mean, this was digging into me pretty good. And I'm not sure about the jaws. I don't know. That really does seem like some sort of a coating that's on there to maybe protect the blades. But yeah, that gap there, we did not do. That gap was there kind of like I said to pre-crimp. And then right up at the top when we started trying to cut, it's like a wax paper, like I said. It's very strange. It's still cutting fine, obviously, because it's done the screw every time. But let's kind of zoom in here. Like when you look at the teeth, it's still shutting great. Like it's flush. I don't see any real damage because, again, that little groove right there is to pre-crimp a thicker bolt. It's just, it's kind of bizarre, really. Like when I run this blade across there, it's kind of like a sticky type of a... I don't have a clue, really. You can kind of see it coming off even. But still, there's no gap in between the teeth. It's closing good. And it lines up right. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I know that we've got it. And we're going to use it for something. Even if that has to just cut, I don't know, 10-gauge cable for me or something like that. I think it could handle that just fine. Clearly the screws it can handle, but again, I would never grab this tool to cut a screw of that size. That's like overkill. It should be like cutting butter. Anything should cut that like butter. That's a bolt cutter, right? So yeah, gonna have to research that and see what the deal is, but it looks good. It was a really good buy. If we have to relegate it to just cutting cable or something, we can do that. But in terms of me going through 1/4 or 3/8, here's a 3/8 stainless bolt. I wouldn't even want to try. I'll just put it that way. So maybe we'll have to pick up a Knipex unit after all. So like I said, I typically, buy the right size. There are times, like if I have a 2-inch bolt, that's all I have, and I need it to be 1.5 inches because it would stick out too far. That's when I would come in and use it. But I gotta say, I'd rather hacksaw a 1/4, and you can hacksaw a 1/4-inch bolt really fast, by the way, even with a dull blade. But I don't know. I'm at a loss on this one. The brush looks really cool. Hopefully it holds up good. This, I know it holds up well. I'm just unsure if I'm going to keep it here as a backup or take it to work and see how it does there. This, it looks really good out of the box. That's just kind of bizarre. And it's uniform on both sides, too. That was a brand new bolt. There shouldn't have been like any weird chemicals or anything on it that might have had an adverse reaction. I don't know. I'm just honestly not sure. So I will leave it at that. LoneStarMopars.com is the website. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all 3 at Lone Star Mopars. If you've used this, if you brought it in on Tool of the Day, what are you cutting with it, and how is it holding up for you? Because again, to me, I wouldn't expect this to cut through, a 1/2-inch bolt, 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, none of that. Actually, I don't think you could. But for a 1/4-inch bolt, I don't think that would exceed the capacity there. 3/8, I would think that might be like the upper limit of this. But I honestly would have thought 1/4 would kind of be like right at its sweet spot, and maybe I'm just mistaken there. To the tool's credit, it did do that, did cut it, but I don't know. I just it's didn't quite tackle the task at hand like I thought it should have. So we'll see. We will continue to investigate it and take it from there. But might size up a little bit and get a Knipex unit. Who knows? We'll figure something out. But I will leave it at that. Thanks for watching. I'll catch y'all in the next one. And we're back, and you're probably thinking, what is going on at this place? And well, it's a funny story. So when you make a lot of videos, you got SD cards, you got external hard drives, you got to edit, you got to render, you got to upload, all that good stuff. And the fun part, of course, is making the video, opening up new tools, testing tools, working on vehicles, all that fun stuff that I really enjoy a lot more than the back end of it. And subsequently, I had quite a few videos stacked up. I made a point to get it done so I could actually move to doing more things to the vehicles. That's getting warmer in the shop, longer days, all that good stuff. This tool haul here, dadgum, I just realized I had brought this over to clean with Ballistol in our video I just attempted to fix, so that was a lost cause. Maybe I'll interject that one somewhere. But one of the things I was messing around with here in this tool haul, it's a short one luckily, so I'm just going to piece this in on you. We've had the brake caliper brush and we had the steel wire brush. Part of what was messed up was the bolt cutter, and part that's kind of convenient too because I did something pretty stupid. But what we have is this. This was Tool of the Day from Gedore. It's awesome. It's an 8-inch bolt cutter. Its part number is going to be 8340 Z200. This is TL. What does the TL mean? Well, there's also a JL. The TL is going to be these blue dipped handles. I actually really like them. I think I would prefer this handle on most things aside from bolt cutters. With a bolt cutter, you're putting forth a lot of effort typically. It's one of the scenarios where you may prefer a bigger, bulkier, hopefully more padded handle. We'll do a lot more on that later, but these are cool. They're made in Austria. They look really good. On Tool of the Day, they were like stupid cheap. And, typical retail price though, if you see these and you gotta have them today, $63.49. The JL version with the fancier handle, not that much more expensive, so you kind of pick your poison. It's not a deal where you say, man, I'd love that handle, I'm not going to pay the extra 40 bucks. It's like $4 if I'm thinking correctly. Case in point right here, this is the handle we would be referencing. If you want the JL Gedore's kind of 2-component handle, multi-grip, comfort grip, whatever you want to call it, this is what it would look like. Handle wise, it's black, blue theme, awesome theme by the way. But these are just the pair of their side cutters. They've been fantastic to me so far, the limited times I've used them. But you can see it's definitely a bulkier handle, but again, with a bolt cutter, I don't know that that's necessarily a downside unless you know you're going to be in like tight confines, and you know that would make a difference. But if you had to have padded handles ever, or you were trying to pick one tool, I think a bolt cutter is a pretty good place to put them. That's just me personally. Now, what I did, I look at these, right, and at work, I've got some big shears for cable, and I've got really big, I don't know, I haven't measured the handles, but I'd assume they're 3 feet or more. The head, though, you know, always on a bolt cutter looks eerily similar, right? And it's just got a bigger back end most of the time, and it just beefs up ever so slightly back here. And at work, we really rarely cut a bolt. It's almost like it would be a last resort type of thing. I stock a ton, so we typically have what we need. But sometimes, you know, if it's like a freak deal, you know, like a one-off type of a custom build or something, maybe I need like a 5/8 by 5 3/4, and I have 5, 5.5, and 6 inches. The 5.5 will not work. I can't get the nut down and secure, so I need the 6 inch. And if for whatever reason 5 3/4 versus 6, we had like a contact point, maybe it was a right angle, I don't know the particulars, I'm just giving you examples, we would have to cut the bolt. I've gotten to the point where I typically hacksaw. And I don't do that because, you know, the bolt cutters suck, or they're, you know, kind of cumbersome to use or anything, which some of them are, particularly at 5/8 and 3/4, which is typical sizes I would cut down. But what I use the hacksaw for really is just because I'm able to come in, kind of bisect the threads and keep it flush where I can continuously thread the nut onto it. A lot of times if you just lop something off, you're going to have a hard time getting the nut to thread for obvious reasons. But when I look at these, and I know that they're 8 inch, you know, that's very common size for a pair of relatively small bolt cutters like this, I assumed, and wrongly so, that these would handle, okay, 1/4 inch bolt. You know, the specs from KC Tool, of course, from Gedore, they're metric. Gedore, I've never ever been able to get one of their catalogs because they're always back ordered. I'm trying to see if I have a 1/4. Guess I'll have to get one out way back here. But I'll show you what I mean. And this is one of the things. I realize, you know, that's a bolt cutter. It looks like a bolt cutter. Bigger bolt cutters look like that. Not going to argue that point, but there comes a point in time, in my opinion, where I don't know that you would call this a bolt cutter. You know, like, it cuts nails and it cuts screws and it cuts aviation cable and does all of those things very well. But this is what I did, okay? I came in, and this, I don't know if it was the tool itself or this bolt that left the funky film on the jaws, but it was uniform on both sides, which was also strange. Either way, Ballistol cleans it up, which is fantastic news. But if I were to show you this, okay, an 8 inch, keep in mind, you know, there's 8 inches of handle back here, and then the head opens that wide, wouldn't you think that a 1/4 inch bolt would be cut? I wouldn't come in and expect this to cut 3/8. I might think, you know, yeah, if I gnaw at it long enough, you know, I'll cut it. But I would have assumed that 1/4 could be cut. Like, I wouldn't even think that that was near, you know, going to be an issue. I would think it would do it. It was probably near the top side. Might even be able to cut 5/16. I would think it could cut 3/8. Again, I wouldn't expect it to so easily. This is 3/8. It's stainless, but I mean, when it fits that well, and this doesn't really fit that well, but you would still think you could cut it if you had to. This actually fits really good, and particularly when you consider that the way this one is designed, they've got this feature at the bottom where if you see the jaws up here and then there's that opening and you're like, oh, that's messed up. No, that's where you're to like pre-crimp. If it's something near the big size, you know, if you're not just like cutting small cable or something, you would pre-crimp this, and then it does that beautifully. But then trying to cut that was a complete nightmare. I mean, I was over here having to like double clutch it and everything. Did I eventually cut this quarter bolt? Yes, I did. Would I ever want to do it again? No. I would get a hacksaw, I would get a Dremel, I would get a cutoff wheel, whatever, depending on the size of the hardware I'm dealing with. I would not reach for these now. In retrospect, I pulled up their specs because I was thinking, man, this is like really disappointing. I guess I should have brought, you know, saved up and just waited for Knipex, and which I kind of wanted to do, but then this was tool of the day and it was a really good buy. And I've had really good luck with most everything I've brought in from Gedore, and the handles do look cool. I like the blue. It's channel lockish, but a little bit more sky blue. Kind of hard to explain, but I like the color. So what I did is I went back in and I was like, I know they had the specs on there. Let me pull it up. So if you would reference it as hard wire, which I assume you would, 5.5 millimeters. And 5.5 millimeters doesn't mean much to me because I'm old school. So when I convert it, 0.217. That's not quite the size of a 1/4 inch bolt, right? Soft wire, it'll handle up to 6 millimeters. That in and of itself translates only to 0.2362, so we're still not cutting anything that's a 1/4. And then piano wire, which again, I guess that's way more popular overseas, but for me it'd be like aviation cable type stuff, throttle cables for example. You'd be looking at 3.8 millimeters, which is 0.149. So this can handle stuff 0.2362 soft and smaller, and then basically 0.217 hard and smaller. So again, 6 millimeter soft, 5.5 millimeter hard. All right, so what does that actually translate to? That translates to screws, okay? This, I believe, is a number 14. It should cut it just fine. Right here, I've got some number 8 screws, machine screws. It'll go through these very easily, and that's important to note. But to me, I consider these screws, in part because they have Phillips slots, you know, whatever on top of them. They're not hex-headed bolts, okay? They're not Allen cap screws that I could consider a bolt. They would be screws. You could have scenarios where, like, heck, a rain gutter that just blew off last night when I came in from the shop. That would technically, you could call that a bolt, like a tech screw type of a thing. But when you hear bolt cutter, I think of bolts. I think of, you know, 1/4, you know, 5/16, 3/8, half, you know, everything along those lines, 5/8 and 3/4, what I typically use at work, and the 7/16, you know, like front shock bolt mounts and everything. But I was surprised that this didn't have the capability to do 1/4. Now, knowing that, I'm glad that the tool survived. It did cut it, like I said. It's not something you'd ever want to do again in your life. But it is a deal where, am I wrong in that regard? Does anyone, like, if you saw this, I don't care the brand, if it's cheap, if it's your favorite American tool truck, if it's Knipex, if it's NWS, if it's VHA stuff from Vietnam, if I see something that's a bolt cutter and has an 8-inch handle, I wouldn't think 1/4 inch bolt would be an issue. I wouldn't expect it to do much more than that, but I would think you could cut it and do so with all the benefits of using a said bolt cutter. Now, I grabbed some safety glasses, and what I want to do here is just kind of showcase this for you, because again, I'm not sure what all survived, but this is just an 8-32 screw, and so we're going to come in, and I'm going to pre-crimp this sucker. Let me bring it. I can't, these safety glasses suck. At work, I get the Nemesis ones, and they don't fog up on me. These fog, and they're currently fogged. I hate that. But right here, this is, I also had the question when I was cutting it, and then in subsequent cuts, if it was a holder and dropper or a flyer, and it is a flyer. So if you have a work piece that you want to keep intact or not lose and have to cut again, maybe put some vice grips on it or a nut or something that's going to let it drop down and not just sling itself across the shop. I'm going to just crimp. I'll try to move the Ballistol for you. And, I'll show you, like, I'm not putting forth much effort at all on this. And in fact, we could cut through it, but I want to highlight the crimp, which I do believe you can see. If you see a spot where it looks like the threads get flattened out and kind of mushed together, and then that just looks like a deeper galley, that's exactly what you should see. So with something near max capacity, you want to pre-cut, and then you want to find that groove, your crimp, if you will. And so if we were going to cut this down, you know, like a 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, whatever we want to do, we would come in, and in fact, just so this doesn't fly, I'm going to hold it here with the channel locks, and I'll let you check out the articulation. There you go. Piece is right there, so it didn't fly too far, in part probably because we held it with the channel locks. But was that easy to cut? Not as easy as you would necessarily think, but it definitely, it beats doing what a lot of people would do, which is use side cutters. But that was a cuttable deal. I got this weird thing. This was in actually a box of 5/8 by 1.25 inch. I stocked grade 5. It's like the shiniest little screw I've ever seen, I guess because it was zinc plated with bolts. But if we needed to come in and trim that off a little bit, this should be effortless. So I'm going to come in. Let's actually grab that so it doesn't fly at us. And I want you to just watch my hand and the head of the screw there. Now that cut very easily, like super, super easy. So anything that size and smaller, I think we're golden. Also at work, I ravaged this off of one of the vertical crates. That's just a nail. Again, I'm not a carpenter. I don't do much with nails. But, what I want to do is, let's say that this wasn't easy to come out, all right? So we're going to come down here and let's pre-crimp this guy, shall we? So I've got it in place. We're just going to come in. We're going to squeeze. We got our little pre-crimp, which, again, I think you can see if it looks like there's a shiny spot where it's flattened out, got a gash. It does. So we're going to come in. We're going to grab it right here. Again, I have no use for this nail. I had two that I didn't use in the original video because I'm pretty sure I have them for something that I don't remember at the time. I'm sure it would come back to me the night after I cut them. So once again, we're going to come in here. I'll let this fly and we'll see what happens. Didn't go too far. It's actually right over here on the other side of this proto breaker bar, and the other end fell. Again, my personal advice when using this style is go ahead, always wear safety glasses, but two, to avoid losing, whether that's a piece you need or the piece you're cutting off, keep that in mind. Maybe put a nut, maybe hold some pliers, have someone else grab it, you know, and go to town. But we've made a few more cuts here, and that is good. That's about all I can really showcase with these. But the jaws aren't near as bad. When I cut through that 1/4 bolt, I mean, they had some funk on them. I'm hoping part of that survived. I think it did. But right here, we've just got like a mild Ballistol. And I say that because I put it on and then it came off as we, you know, cleaned down other tools. Just running this over, man, it's getting windy out. Gonna be fun walking back in. Anyway, running that over, it seems to take off whatever that is. And again, I don't know if it's something on the jaws of the bolt cutter or if it's actually, you know, like a coating coming off of the screws and bolts that we're cutting. But I do have to say, I like these. I like the handle, given that I know their capacities and I won't be maxing them out again. I don't know that this is too bad. I would, if you had to pick one tool for a comfort grip, I think a bolt cutter is a great choice, because that's one time that you're actually going to be in a situation bearing down like that. When I just use these channel locks, you know, like pick something up, I'm like barely holding them. You know, you can articulate much easier when you're not putting full pressure through your palm. And that's kind of the opposite with these. You actually need that grip strength, the squeeze ability, right? And of course, the more comfortable, especially, you know, if you weren't wearing gloves like me, I mean, you feel that a lot more. That's almost like having the steel in your hand. That said, the textured grip Gedore does is actually pretty nice. It's pretty confidence inspiring, doesn't slip too much, and my hands are covered in Ballistol, so that says a lot for the finish. That said, it did not cut this small wire very well. It will cut it. I guess it's just like one of those things that's too small type of a deal. So we'll come in. Again, you really shouldn't be using these on something this small, but in the event that you wanted to, you almost just kind of have to pull to articulate the cut, which once you do that, it's fine. Not sure the size on this, but this is out of that old blower motor I took apart. I just always try to pull the copper and the lugs, connections. You never know when you're going to need something like that, you know? And then if it's got a lead on it, hey, more stuff I can cut up in videos, right? So that's what I'm doing. I would say this is probably 16 gauge. Is it labeled? 18. My apologies. My sincerest apologies. Can't believe I missed that. So 18 gauge wire. This should be no issue. Cuts that really well. And again, this is overkill for this, right? This is where these side cutters here would come in handy, or a way smaller pair, or even the combination pliers. But at tool of the day pricing, hard to pass on those. And I feel terrible for subjecting them to the 1/4-inch bolt when that was just a bit beyond their capacity, right? 0.21, 0.25, what's the difference, really? To their credit, they did cut, and they cut it very well, but it took an awful lot of effort on my end, more so than I'd ever want to have to use with a tool that was labeled as a bolt cutter. But bottom line, use the appropriate size. I think you're home free. I didn't want it to reflect poorly on the tool because of something stupid I did. But again, it is what it is. Still might pick up the Knipex ones. It'll be something I just have on a wish list and wait for a sale or tool of the day type thing. And we just go to town. I'd kind of like the angled head ones, so we can like flush cut a little easier. But hey, that's a pipe dream. We'll just wait and wish, see what happens. If funds allow it at the time. But I think that's it. I should be able to splice that video together. And I only was going into the demonstration because it was such a small tool haul. So that's kind of like the highlight, holy grail of the show. And I felt like we could spend some time on her, so we did. With that said, I'm going to quit rambling. Hopefully I can piece this together. Once again, my apologies. This one, we lost part of the video. In the tool haul I'm about to redo, we lost everything. I'm going to recreate that as quick as I can because I'm hungry. So with that said, as always, thank you so much for watching. LoneStarMopars.com is the website. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all three at Lone Star Mopars. With that said, I'm going to quit rambling, set up for the tool haul. I got to go find everything. And, luckily, one of them is that tack claw, so eliminated that from my life. But anyway, I'm going to get on that, and I will catch you back here for more from the shop.